The human ship broke through the thick clouds, shaking from enemy fire. Captain Daniel Hayes gripped the controls, sweat running down his face. He had been sent on a rescue mission, but no one told him the planet was in the middle of a war. Alien. Ships swarmed the skies like predators hunting prey. He dodged a blast that lit the clouds in gold, his heart pounding like a drum. When he finally broke through the storm, the sight ahead froze him. A massive golden palace stood at the edge of a wide cliff, surrounded by burning forests and falling debris. Alien warriors in bright armor fought desperately against a dark army. The air was filled with roars, energy blasts, and the sound of collapsing towers. Daniel had seen battles before, but this felt different. This felt like the last stand of a kingdom. He landed the ship on a damaged landing platform, metal groaning under the weight. As soon as the hatch opened, guards in gold armor surrounded him, their weapons raised. One of them shouted in a language he didn't know. Daniel slowly raised his hands to show he meant no harm. A guard stepped closer, scanning him with a glowing device. Then, without a word, they pulled him toward the palace gates. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of incense and smoke. Huge pillars carved with alien symbols rose to the ceiling. At the far end of the hall sat the queen, wearing armor like flowing molten gold, her crown glowing under the light. Her silver-white hair fell to her waist, and her cold, perfect eyes studied Daniel as if she could read his soul. He stopped walking when she raised her hand, and the guard stepped back. "You are human," she said in a deep, melodic voice that carried both command and sorrow. "Your kind does not belong here. Yet the stars have brought you to my palace in its dying hour." Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but the queen stood and walked toward him. Every step echoed through the hall, and the weight of her gaze made it hard to breathe. Then she grasped his hands with surprising strength. "Please, human, marry my daughter," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. Daniel froze, unsure if he heard her right. Marry? Her daughter? He looked over the queen's shoulder, and from the shadows stepped a young woman in golden armor. She was breathtaking tall, graceful, with piercing blue eyes and a face that seemed carved by the gods. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes locked onto his as if testing his worth. Daniel's mind raced. He didn't know their customs. He didn't know why a queen in the middle of a war would make such a request. "I don't understand," he finally said. "Why me?" The queen's grip tightened. "Because my enemies will take her if I fall. Only a bond recognized by ancient law will protect her. And only you can make that bond real." Daniel felt the walls of the hall closing in around him. The princess stepped forward, her golden armor shining in the flickering light. "If you agree, our fates will be tied," she said, her voice soft but steady. "If you refuse, both our lives will be lost by nightfall." Outside, the thunder of battle grew louder, shaking the palace. Daniel glanced toward the open balcony, where smoke and fire painted the horizon. He had come here to save someone, but he never imagined it would be like this. Daniel felt the weight of the queen's words pressing into his mind. He could see the desperation in her eyes, hidden behind her royal composure. Around them, the palace trembled as distant explosions echoed. The scent of smoke was creeping in from the open windows. The princess stood silently beside her mother, her eyes fixed on him as though she was measuring his soul. He turned his head toward the balcony and saw the burning city below. Golden towers that once shone like the sun were now collapsing into rubble. Alien soldiers fought in the streets, their armor reflecting the fire. The enemy's black banners moved closer with every heartbeat. Daniel knew the war outside would soon reach the palace walls. He had been in battles before, but the feeling here was different. This was not just war. This was extinction. The queen released his hand slowly, as if letting go of the last hope she had. "If you will not marry her, then go," she said. Her voice was calm, but Daniel could hear the pain underneath. The princess took a single step forward, her face unreadable, yet her eyes carried something that made him hesitate. He looked at her and saw not just beauty, but a strange fire that drew him closer. "I didn't say no," Daniel replied. His own voice sounded strange to him, like someone else was speaking. The queen raised an eyebrow, studying him again. "Then you will agree?" she asked. Daniel hesitated, knowing this decision would change everything. He thought of his mission, his orders, and the promise he made to his crew. But he also thought of the fire in the princess's eyes and the dying city outside. Before he could speak again, a loud crash shook the room. One of the massive palace doors exploded inward, and enemy soldiers poured in. The golden armored guards rushed forward, their energy blades clashing against the invaders' dark weapons. Sparks and light filled the air. The queen's guards fought fiercely, but the enemy kept coming. Daniel instinctively reached for the sidearm strapped to his leg and pulled it free. The princess moved closer to him, her hand resting briefly on his arm. "Stay with me," she said firmly. Daniel turned toward her just as an enemy soldier charged. Without thinking, he raised his weapon and fired. The blast struck the soldier in the chest, sending him to the ground. The princess stepped past him, drawing her own curved blade from her side. She moved with deadly grace, cutting down another attacker before he could strike. The battle inside the throne room was chaos. Guards shouted orders. Enemy soldiers roared in their strange language. The queen stood tall, watching the fight with eyes that missed nothing. Daniel fought side by side with the princess, his training keeping him alive in the storm of blades and fire. She fought without fear, every strike precise and powerful. It was clear she had been trained for this moment her entire life. When the last enemy soldier fell, the room fell silent except for the sound of labored breathing. Smoke curled in through the shattered doors. The queen looked at her daughter, then at Daniel. "The walls will not hold much longer," she said. "If you still choose to leave, go now. But if you stay, you must accept what I ask of you." Daniel met the princess's eyes again. This time, there was no hesitation in her gaze. He stepped toward the queen and spoke clearly. "I'll stay," he said. "But you'll have to tell me what this bond means, and what will happen after." The queen's lips curved into the faintest smile, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Then follow me," she said, turning toward a hidden door behind the throne. The princess walked beside him, close enough for him to feel the warmth of her presence. The hidden door slid open with a soft hum, revealing a narrow passage lit by golden crystals embedded in the walls. The air inside was cooler, carrying the faint scent of flowers. Daniel followed the queen and the princess, his boots echoing on the smooth stone floor. Behind them, guards sealed the throne room, buying them time from the next attack. They walked in silence for several minutes, the sounds of the battle fading as they went deeper underground. The passage widened into a chamber filled with strange symbols carved into the walls. In the center stood a raised platform with a glowing ring of light hovering above it. The queen stepped forward and turned to face Daniel. "This is the binding circle," she said. "It will mark you as her protector in the eyes of our people." Her voice was steady, but her eyes searched his face for doubt. Daniel looked at the ring of light, feeling its energy hum through the air. "And what does this bond do exactly?" he asked. The queen's gaze hardened. "It will connect your lives. Her pain will be your pain. Her safety will be your duty. You will be tied together until death, and no law or force can break it." Daniel felt the weight of her words. It wasn't just a marriage. It was something far more dangerous. The princess stepped onto the platform, the light wrapping around her like a living thing. "If you do not want this, speak now," she said, her voice calm but carrying a strange tension. "But if you agree, you must know that the enemy will hunt us both until the end." Daniel's hands tightened into fists. The thought of leaving her to face that fate alone made his stomach twist. He stepped forward without another word, the moment his foot touched the platform. The ring of light flared brighter. Symbols on the walls began to glow, filling the chamber with a soft golden radiance. The queen raised her hands, speaking in a language Daniel couldn't understand. The air grew warm, and a strange pull spread through his chest like an invisible thread connecting him to the princess. She met his eyes and did not look away. Energy swirled around them, lifting their hair and clothes. Daniel felt a sharp jolt in his heart, and in that instant, he could feel her presence inside his mind. It wasn't words, but emotions, fear, determination, and something else buried deep. He realized she could feel him too. They were linked, bound by something neither of them could escape. The queen lowered her hands, and the light slowly faded. "It is done," the queen said quietly. Daniel stepped back, feeling the bond like a faint heartbeat in his mind. The princess moved to stand beside him, her expression unreadable but her shoulders set with new strength. "From this moment," the queen continued, "you are one. If you fall, she will fall. If she lives, you will live." Daniel nodded, understanding that there was no turning back now. Before they could speak further, a guard rushed into the chamber, his armor scorched and cracked. "My queen," he said breathlessly, "the enemy has broken through the outer walls. They are inside the palace." The queen's eyes hardened. "Then we have little time," she said. She turned to Daniel. "You must get her out. Take the north passage to the mountain gates. My soldiers will cover your escape." The guard saluted and ran ahead to prepare the way. Daniel glanced at the princess. She met his eyes with a steady look. "We move together," she said. "No matter what happens, we do not separate." Daniel could feel her resolve through the bond, and it strengthened his own. The queen stepped forward one last time, placing her hands on her daughter's shoulders. "Survive," she whispered. "For our people." Then she looked at Daniel, her gaze sharp and unyielding. "Protect her with your life." Daniel and the princess moved quickly through the north passage, their footsteps echoing against the stone walls. The air was colder here, carrying a sharp metallic scent from the blood spilled above. Behind them, the rumble of battle shook the ground, and distant shouts told them the enemy was closing in. Daniel gripped his weapon tighter, his eyes scanning every shadow. The corridor opened into a long hall lined with tall statues of past rulers. Each figure was carved in gold, their faces proud and stern. The princess moved with purpose, but Daniel could feel through the bond that her heart was heavy. She glanced at the statues without slowing down, her jaw set. This was her home, and she might never see it again. The thought made his chest tighten. A sudden sound broke the silence ahead. The clatter of armored boots echoed from the darkness, growing louder. Daniel motioned for the princess to stop and raised his weapon. From the shadows emerged a group of enemy soldiers in black armor, their glowing visors fixed on the intruders. Without hesitation, Daniel fired the first shot. Dropping the lead soldier before the rest charged forward, the hall erupted into chaos. Daniel ducked under a blade swing, countering with a quick strike to the soldier's chest. The princess moved beside him, her curved blade flashing under the light. She fought with precision, every move flowing into the next. The bond between them pulsed with urgency, each feeling the other's focus and determination. They moved as one, cutting through the enemy ranks with deadly efficiency. When the last soldier fell, Daniel scanned the hall for more threats. Princess wiped her blade clean on a fallen enemy's cloak. "We can't waste time," she said firmly. Daniel nodded, and they continued forward, pushing through a heavy door at the end of the hall. Beyond it, a narrow stairway spiraled upward, the sound of wind growing louder with each step. At the top, they emerged into an open courtyard surrounded by high walls. The night sky above was lit by streaks of fire as ships battled in the air. The mountain gate stood at the far end, guarded by a handful of golden-armored soldiers. The queen's loyal men straightened when they saw the princess, their weapons ready. One stepped forward, saluting her before addressing Daniel. "The path beyond the gate leads to the high cliffs," he said. "From there, you can reach the old escape tunnels." The princess looked at Daniel, and he could feel her thoughts through the bond. She didn't want to run. She wanted to fight. But she also knew her mother's command was absolute. "We'll go," she said aloud. The soldier nodded and began unlocking the gate. Daniel kept his weapon raised, scanning the sky. Enemy ships were getting closer, their black hulls glowing under the fires of battle. The gates opened with a groan, revealing a steep, winding path along the cliffside. Below, the valley burned, filled with enemy forces pouring into the city. The air smelled of smoke and ash, and the sound of battle rolled up from below like a storm. Daniel stepped onto the path, keeping the princess close to his side. The soldiers followed for a short distance before turning back to defend the gate. Halfway down the path, an explosion rocked the cliffside. Stone shattered, and part of the trail crumbled into the valley. Daniel pulled the princess back just in time to avoid falling. From above, enemy flyers swooped in, their weapons glowing. Daniel fired upward, hitting one and sending it spinning into the rocks. The princess leaped forward, slicing the wing of another as it passed too close. The bond burned with shared adrenaline. They reached a narrow archway carved into the mountain. Beyond it lay darkness and the faint sound of running water. Daniel took one last look at the burning city before stepping inside. The princess paused beside him, her eyes fixed on the distant palace. Through the bond, he felt the depth of her sorrow and her promise for vengeance. Without a word, they entered the tunnel, leaving the battlefield behind. The tunnel was narrow and damp, with walls glistening from the steady drip of water. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of minerals and earth. Daniel moved ahead with his weapon raised, the princess following closely behind. Their footsteps echoed softly, swallowed quickly by the darkness around them. The path twisted sharply, leading them deeper into the mountain. Crystals embedded in the stone gave off a faint glow, casting pale blue light on their faces. Daniel glanced back at the princess, seeing her expression set with focus. Through the bond, he could feel the weight of her thoughts, memories of the burning city, the faces of her people, and the image of her mother standing tall against the invaders. They reached a wider section of the tunnel where an underground river flowed beside the path. The sound of rushing water filled the air, masking the faint hum of distant engines. Daniel stopped, narrowing his eyes. "We're not alone," he said quietly. The princess drew her blade without hesitation, her gaze scanning the shadows. The bond between them tightened, both of them ready for the threat. From the darkness ahead, figures emerged. Enemy soldiers in black armor stepped into the dim light, their weapons drawn. Daniel fired the first shot, striking one in the chest. The tunnel erupted in chaos, the sharp cracks of gunfire and the clash of blades echoing off the walls. The princess moved with fluid precision, her blade cutting down attackers with swift, decisive strikes. Daniel fought beside her, the bond guiding his movements. He could sense her intentions before she acted, allowing him to cover her blind spots while she guarded his. Together, they cut through the enemy line, their movements seamless. When the last soldier fell, the tunnel was silent again, except for the rush of the river. Daniel lowered his weapon, breathing hard. The princess stepped closer, scanning him for injuries. "You're fine," she said, though her tone carried more relief than she likely intended. Daniel gave a small nod, feeling the same relief mirrored through the bond. They continued down the tunnel, their pace quickening. The ground beneath them began to slope upward, and the air grew fresher, carrying a hint of the open sky. They emerged into a hidden valley surrounded by towering cliffs. A silver-blue moon hung above, bathing the landscape in soft light. Strange plants with glowing petals swayed gently in the wind. The valley was quiet, untouched by the chaos raging beyond the mountains. Daniel paused for a moment, taking in the beauty, but the princess kept moving toward a narrow path on the far side. "This way," she said, her voice firm. "There is an outpost ahead. If it still stands, we can regroup there." Daniel followed, keeping his senses sharp. The path wound through the valley, past crystal-clear pools and jagged rock formations. It felt almost unreal after everything they had seen, but the weight of their mission kept them from relaxing. The bond carried a steady current of resolve. Between them, halfway through the valley, the quiet was broken by the distant whine of engines. Daniel looked up to see enemy flyers sweeping across the moonlit sky. Their searchlights cut through the darkness, scanning the ground. "Move," he said sharply, guiding the princess toward a cluster of rocks. They crouched in the shadows. As the lights passed overhead, his pulse slowed only when the sound of engines faded into the distance. When they finally reached the far side of the valley, a small structure came into view, a low building made of stone and metal, partially hidden against the cliff. Faint lights glowed in its narrow windows. The princess approached cautiously, her blade ready. Daniel kept his weapon raised, his eyes scanning for movement. As they neared the door, it slid open with a hiss, and a figure stepped out, wearing golden armor and the crest of the Queen's Guard. Asterisk the soldier at the door raised a hand in greeting, his expression one of relief. "Your Highness," he said, bowing to the princess. "We feared the worst." His armor was scratched and dented, proof of the battles he had fought to survive. Daniel kept his weapon ready, scanning the surrounding cliffs for signs of pursuit. Inside the outpost, the air was warmer, lit by the soft glow of crystal lamps. A map of the region was spread across a metal table, marked with shifting red and green lights. Several soldiers sat nearby, tending to wounds and reloading weapons. The princess stepped forward, speaking with quiet authority. "We need to know the situation," she said. "Has the northern pass been secured?" The soldier's grim expression gave her the answer before he spoke. "The pass is lost," he admitted. "The enemy controls it, and their main force is moving toward the western settlements. If they take those, there will be nowhere left for our people to run." The princess's jaw tightened. Daniel could feel her frustration through the bond. Sharp and heavy. He stepped closer to the map, studying the markings. "Then we need another way," he said. "Something they won't expect." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. The soldier hesitated before speaking again. "There is one path. It leads through the silent cliffs, but no one goes there willingly. The storms tear ships apart, and the ground is unstable." Daniel looked at the princess, waiting for her decision. She met his eyes without fear. "We'll take it," she said. Her voice was calm, but the bond carried the truth. She was ready to risk anything if it meant saving her people. They gathered supplies quickly: water, ration packs, and extra ammunition. Daniel checked his weapon while the princess strapped on a reinforced chest plate. The soldiers worked in tense silence, each glanced toward the door, reminding them the enemy could arrive at any moment. When they were ready, the soldier who had greeted them stepped forward. "I will guide you as far as the cliff's edge," he said. "Beyond that, you will be on your own." The journey through the narrow mountain paths was treacherous. Loose rock shifted underfoot, and the wind howled through the gaps in the cliffs. Dark clouds gathered overhead, casting long shadows across the jagged peaks. Daniel kept close to the princess, the bond between them a constant reminder of the promise he had made. Each step felt heavier with the knowledge that one mistake could mean the end for both of them. As they neared the edge of the silent cliffs, the sound of the wind grew into a deafening roar. The soldier pointed to a narrow ledge that wound its way down the cliffside. "Follow that path," he shouted over the noise. "It will take you to the other side." But be careful, the storms here can appear without warning." The princess nodded in thanks, and without another word, she and Daniel began the descent. The ledge was barely wide enough for 2 feet side by side. Below them, a vast drop disappeared into swirling mist. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the jagged stone like the teeth of some colossal beast. The wind lashed at them, threatening to throw them off balance. Daniel moved behind the princess, ready to catch her if she slipped. The bond thrummed with steady focus, each of them drawing strength from the other. Halfway down, a sudden gust struck with the force of a hammer. The princess staggered, and Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her against the rock face. A chunk of the ledge crumbled away beneath their feet, tumbling into the abyss. "We keep moving," she said, her voice firm despite the danger. They pressed on, step by careful step, until the ledge widened into a small platform sheltered by an overhang. From this vantage point, they could see the far side of the cliffs. Beyond the storms lay open plains, dotted with the faint lights of settlements. The princess stood beside him, her hair whipping in the wind, eyes fixed on their destination. Daniel knew the journey ahead would be just as dangerous as the one they had already survived. But with the bond between them, he also knew they would face it together. They left the shelter of the overhang and began the final stretch across the silent cliffs. The wind still tore at them, but the worst of the storm had passed. The narrow path wound upward now, leading toward a ridge that overlooked the open plains. Daniel could see the faint glow of settlements in the distance, like tiny stars scattered across the land. The climb was exhausting. Loose stones shifted under their boots, and the cold air burned their lungs. The princess never slowed, her determination pushing her forward. Through the bond, Daniel could feel her resolve burning bright despite the pain in her body. He matched her pace, knowing that if she fell, he would fall with her. That knowledge kept every step steady and careful. When they reached the ridge, they paused to catch their breath. From this height, the plain stretched endlessly, broken only by patches of forest and winding rivers. But Daniel's attention was caught by movement near the nearest settlement. Dark shapes moved against the glow of lights, and he knew instantly they were not friendly. The enemy had reached this side before them. The princess followed his gaze, and her jaw tightened. "They will destroy everything," she said. "We have to warn the people before it is too late." Daniel nodded, already scanning the terrain for the fastest route down. The bond carried a wave of urgency between them, sharpening their focus. Every second they waited meant more lives in danger. They began their descent along a steep trail, carved into the hillside. The path was faster than the cliffs, but it was also more exposed. Daniel kept his weapon ready, his eyes scanning for any sign of enemy scouts. The princess moved just ahead of him, her blade still in hand. The silence between them was filled with unspoken understanding, each knowing the other's thoughts. Without the need for words, halfway down, they heard the rumble of engines. Daniel pulled the princess into the cover of a rocky outcrop as 2 enemy patrol vehicles passed below. Dust swirled in their wake, carried upward by the wind. Daniel waited until the sound faded before signaling her to move again. The bond carried her gratitude and trust, a steady reassurance that they were still in this together. By the time they reached the base of the ridge, the settlement was only a short distance away. Small homes made of stone and metal stood clustered together, with narrow streets winding between them. Faint lanterns glowed in windows, and Daniel could see a few people moving about, unaware of the danger approaching. The princess quickened her pace, determination radiating through the bond. They entered the settlement and were met with curious stares. Most of the people had never seen a human before, but they recognized the princess immediately. She raised her hand to quiet their murmurs. "The enemy is coming," she said firmly. "We must prepare to defend this place." Daniel stepped beside her, scanning the crowd for anyone armed. He spotted a few hunters and farmers who looked ready to fight if called upon. A tall man stepped forward, carrying a long rifle slung across his back. "We've heard the battle in the distance," he said. "Tell us what needs to be done." The princess outlined a quick defense plan, assigning positions and instructing them to gather supplies. Daniel moved through the group, offering advice on barricades and firing lines. The people listened without question, their trust in the princess giving him authority as well. As the villagers worked, Daniel and the princess stood at the edge of the settlement, watching the darkness beyond the plains. In the distance, the faint glow of enemy vehicles was drawing closer. The bond between them thrummed with shared determination and readiness. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side, their fates tied by more than just the ancient bond of the Queen's people. The settlement worked with surprising speed. Barricades of stone, wood, and metal scraps rose at the edges of the village. Lanterns were dimmed, leaving only enough light to see the pathways. Farmers armed themselves with old hunting rifles, and the hunters strung bows with practiced hands. The princess moved among them, offering calm words and sharp instructions. Daniel could feel her pride and worry mingled through the bond. From the ridge beyond the fields, the hum of engines grew louder. Shadows moved against the dim horizon, the glow of enemy lights growing brighter with every passing moment. Daniel checked his weapon one last time, sliding into position behind a low stone wall. The princess took her place at the center of the line, her golden armor gleaming faintly in the moonlight. The people looked to her like they would to a beacon in the dark. The first enemy vehicles broke through the mist, their black hulls glinting under the pale light. They advanced slowly at first, testing the defenses. Daniel waited until they were in range, then gave a sharp nod to the villagers holding rifles. A volley of shots rang out, striking the lead vehicle and forcing it to swerve. Shouts filled the air as the rest of the enemy force surged forward. The battle hit fast and hard. Daniel fired steadily, each shot finding its mark. The princess moved along the barricade, cutting down any soldier who broke through. Through the bond, Daniel could feel her strength, her focus, and the unshakable determination to protect every life in the settlement. He matched her pace, knowing that if one of them fell, the other would follow. The villagers fought with a fierce desperation born from defending their home. Arrows whistled through the air, striking enemy soldiers as they tried to breach the defenses. Smoke began to rise from the burning wreck of a vehicle, filling the air with the bitter scent of fuel. The enemy pushed harder, but every time they gained ground, Daniel and the princess drove them back. In the middle of the chaos, an explosion tore through the left barricade. Enemy troops rushed the opening, weapons blazing. Daniel was already moving, sprinting toward the breach. The princess followed without hesitation, their bond thrumming with urgency. Side by side, they cut down the invaders, their movements in perfect sync. When the last of the attackers fell, they sealed the gap with whatever materials they could find. The enemy began to falter. Their vehicles pulled back under covering fire, and the remaining soldiers retreated toward the shadows. A cheer rose from the villagers, but Daniel kept his weapon raised. The princess stood tall at the center of the defenses, her eyes locked on the retreating enemy. "They will return," she said. "But tonight we have shown them this place will not fall." Easily, the villagers gathered around her, their faces lit with gratitude and newfound courage. The tall hunter stepped forward again, bowing his head. "We will fight with you," he said. "Wherever you lead, we will follow." The princess nodded, her voice steady. "Then we will rebuild and prepare. Our war is not over." Daniel felt the surge of hope through the bond, warm and strong despite the night's violence. When the crowd began to disperse, Daniel and the princess walked to the edge of the settlement. From there, they could see the distant glow of the palace, now only faint against the horizon. Smoke still curled into the sky, but it no longer seemed like a sign of defeat. The princess turned to him, her voice quiet. "You could have left," she said. "But you stayed. Why?" Daniel met her gaze without hesitation. "Because I made a promise," he said. "And because now your fight is my fight." The bond between them pulsed with something deeper than duty. The princess gave a faint smile, one that carried the weight of the battles ahead and the hope of what might come after. Together, they stood in the moonlight, knowing the war was far from over, but certain they would face it as one.